Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with.
I'm John Houlihan. I'm creative lead on the Achtung Cthulhu 2D20 RPG.
And today we're going to talk about The Serpent and the Sands, part of the Achtung Cthulhu newest book from the Achtung Cthulhu line from Modiphius Entertainment. There's so much I want to talk about this book. We've talked before about how much we love history. So let's first talk about the beginnings of this project. Well, how did this project come to be?
Well, as probably guys who followed Achtung Cthulhu know, and I'm sure you know as well, we used to have a Call of Cthulhu edition, which for sixth and seventh edition of Call of Cthulhu, and then a couple of years ago we kind of bought it in house to work on Modiphius's 2D20 settings, and there was actually or a 2D20 system rather, and there was a previous guide to North Africa as part of that Call of Cthulhu version. And it's such a great setting and such a great kind of campaign area, and actually one of my favorites as well. That was just a very sort of logical fit for the first big kind of early war release for Achtung Cthulhu. We're kind of trying to do an early war component for new players, and then a late war component for kind of more experienced players. So we started off with Shadows of Atlantis, was a sort of pre-war campaign that set things up, and then the first. I mean, we could have done other maybe things around the Battle of Britain and things like that, and that may well still happen. But the sort of real big first meaty campaign I wanted to tackle was North Africa, and actually. I'm very environmentally friendly when it comes to content. I wrote many years ago, I wrote a novella called Tomb of the Eons, which was a sort of story set in the Achtung Cthulhu world and based in North Africa. And it was about the nefarious Nazis kind of meddling where they shouldn't and raising this ziggurat in the sands. And so that was just the sort of initial idea that kind of germinated away in the background. I was thinking, how do I kind of, develop that? So that they're the sort of basic two ideas that came about. We wanted to do, and it's the kind of a first for us as well in doing a combined guide and campaign book. So the first half of the book, or probably about the first third of the book, is new character options, new archetypes, new backgrounds, new characteristics, new talents, new weapons, all the stuff that players will, like to explore for, developing their character, perhaps in a North African setting. And then the second half of the book is, or the second part of the book, is this great big epic 10-part campaign where you get to follow on from the that original sort of premise of inadvisedly waking the Ophidians from their centuries-long slumber, and in this case, it kind of it developed into a full campaign. And this was sort of the first one. I wrote a lot of the Forest of Fear, which was our last sort of major release last year. But this was so big that I couldn't really do it all myself, or even in conjunction with like another writer like Bill Heron did on Forest of Fear. So we had a whole team of great writers, and they took an episode or a couple of episodes each and sort of developed it. But yeah, it's our kind of that's the sort of background. It's the mingling of a few different ideas, as probably these things always are. But yeah, it's combined the guidebook, new campaign, and sort of developed that idea from the novella that all came together for this particular book.
And I love that this campaign is based in North Africa. So yeah, if I may ask, like, was this must have been a lot of fun, because North Africa, I mean, if you think of a lot of the classic like adventuring, finding lost artifacts and discovering lost secrets of magic type of stories, usually North Africa or Southern Europe, it's involved in some way.
Yeah, well, I'd say probably for you British readers, the North African campaign is very evocative. We've got that great story around Tobruk, But of course, it's, you know, if you look in the wider war, and actually I read a very good book, which was original first-person accounts of some of the British, the Italians, the German, even the German soldiers who fought in that campaign. And it's an amazing kind of area just for World War II. But you're right, of course, it's, you know, Africa is a fascinating continent rather, and you've got such rich history. You've got obviously the Egyptians, a major world culture, incredibly fascinating, and then you've got all the African, North African cultures as well. The Romans were hugely involved there. Alexander the Great had a little sojourn in there as well. So it's such rich source material. There's almost too much, you know, there's almost too much you can draw on. But we've tried to include a little flavour of everything in there. Particularly there's a little foray into Greek and Roman history at one point during the campaign. But yeah, it's such a rich and diverse continent with some great stories and some great settings as well to base yourself in. So yeah, I mean, you could tell that with the writers as well. They, you know, I kind of did the narrative design and direction on it, but I just sort of gave them the outline and they went off and had tremendous amounts of fun bringing it to life, basically.
So the second chapter, the Secret War in North Africa. So there's a lot of organizations involved in these series. I don't want to say too much. What can you say, non-spoilery as much as you can, about this section?
Of course, yeah. Well, you know, we've got our classic Allied and Axis organisations. So we've got Section M, who are the British Secret Occult Service, Majestic, who are the American Occult Service, Secret Service. We've got Black Sun, who are the sort of sorceress Nazis, and Nachtwolf, who are the sort of tech Nazis. So they're always the basis of what our guys are doing. You know, who will be doing what, and it's just finding what those guys will be doing in North Africa. Section M is very active in this part because it's a major campaign area, and it was also very strategically important for Britain during the Second World War, bringing troops and supplies from India through the Suez Canal and stuff like that. So the basis of it was always going to be what those four organisations are doing in North Africa. But also, again, just drawing a bit on the history and stuff, we wanted to, mark out some of the, and we're trying to walk a very delicate line here and not give away too much, but some of the organisations like the Children of Typhon, who are in the Achtung Cthulhu lore, who have some strongholds here. But we also introduced some new guys as well. We were very lucky we've got some great Italian partners in Need Games who do translations of Achtung Cthulhu for Italy. And it was great to have them on board to bring a bit of flavour and colour. And they invented a new occult organisations for the Italians called the Eye of Ur, who have their sticky fingers all over Africa as well, looking at it as a great place. They're kind of a mystical occult force, very interested in old Roman artefacts, and there's plenty of those in North Africa, of course, and ruins of Carthage and all that kind of thing. So, this chapter kind of looks at, in very broad sense, what all the different secret war organisations are doing. And gives, I guess, some flavour for the GM to kind of create their own adventures. We don't want to be rigid and say, hey, this is what's happening 100%. We just want to give more of a flavour, really, so GMs can use it as inspiration for their own kind of occult adventures. So that was the kind of thinking behind that chapter. Inspirational background, but without being sort of too rigid and say it must be like this. No, we want GMs, of course, to kind of do their own thing, but we just want to give them that inspiration, that background to spark their imagination, really.
So chapter 3, North Africa Needs You, is definitely one of my favorite chapters, obviously because this is the section where you talk to your players and say, hey, these are the options of what you could be in this setting. If you want to be if you're interested in smuggling, there's an occupation for you, or a spy, or just straight up Indiana Jones style adventurer. So there's a lot of some of these options are new. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, they're all new kind of archetypes that were sort of. Again, we wanted to kind of give a flavour of the theatre that you're operating in, but also provide, new options for players. So you're absolutely right. I mean, there's the classic kind of adventurer, which is your Indiana Jones, archaeologist or artifact treasure hunter, Tomb Raider, you might even say, if you want to look for some thingies, and just give players new options so that if they wanted to start new characters or kind of remix their characters a little bit, having experienced the travails of North Africa, they could. And yeah, we wanted to give a little bit more flesh and just a few more options, I suppose, for players to explore. So you've got all those new archetypes to be the sort of primary building block of your character, but you've also got backgrounds as well to kind of add a bit more colour to. So for those who don't know, or those who have not seen the system before, when you build a character in Achtung Cthulhu, you can go down that very straight route of creating a real sort of typical character. One of the nice things about the system is that your agent, as we call them, will be made up of like an archetype, a background, and a characteristic. So these three, the archetype is probably the most dominant one, but it does allow a degree of sort of flexibility, I guess we call multi-classing in other systems. So you can create a really unique kind of individual. So you might have, just to pull three of these from that chapter, you might have someone who's primarily a gambler, but they could also be a French Foreign Legionary, which would be their character, their background, and they might have in their characteristic something like the blood of Yig, so which is a sort of mean that somewhere in the past one of their ancestors was Serpent or part Ophidian. So we like to kind of give players plenty of options to really make a unique character and give their characters some unique spins that perhaps other systems don't have.
Chapter 4, Heroes and Villains. I saw this as almost an extension of Chapter 2, where you could see, if you want to know who these are representatives of these organizations are, you have a way to have that available for the game. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. Yeah, they kind of work hand in glove with the sort of lore, and this is basically giving, I guess, the GM, but also the players to an extent, putting more flesh on the bones of the people who be operating in this theatre, this North African theatre. So on the Allied side, you have like the classic Australian infantry, who the guys who were called the Heroes of the Tobruk, the 9th Division of Australian Infantry, who held it for months at a time and were besieged and had some really tough conditions. And you've also, of course, got the Long Range Desert Patrol Group and the sort of nascent SAS, the first born in North Africa. And then, of course, you've got opposition as well. As I mentioned, our friends from Need Games, they helped put together some Italian troop archetypes, because you need people to fight against, or eventually I think the Italians came over to the Allied side. And then, of course, you've got your classic Black Sun and Nat Wolf troopers, some of the specialists who operate in North Africa. Nat Wolf have got, for example, a sort of specialist sniper class called Scorpions, who have these kind of environment suits that allow them to operate in the desert for a long time, Blau crystal powered, of course. Black Sun have got new animal or beast handler archetypes, like the fearsome Crocodile Meister, who's got an augmented assault crocodile for players to use, which kind of, is a fun thematic thing. And then we've got a whole new cultist group called the Serpent's Tooth as well, who are a cult who've been waiting for the Ophidians to rise again and sort of secretly worship them and stuff. And we've got a whole breakdown of everyone from their sort of priests to their high priests, some of their assassins, their warriors, all that kind of stuff. So the idea is to just give GMs a great set of NPCs to play around with and have fun with, and of course, they can make up their own. But there's some interesting ones there to explore. They're used in the campaign as well, but we hope there'll be inspiration again for GMs just to go, well, we found a Serpent's Tooth stronghold, and here's who might be in it, and they can really quickly and easily populate it with these guys.
Chapter 5, Rise of the Serpent. This is our section about the Ophidians, which I'm excited about because it gives me, I know this is a Cthulhu Lovecraftian, flavored game, but I keep thinking of Conan. I keep thinking of the old sword and sorcery stuff. So what can you tell us about this chapter?
Well, I'm just like you. I'm a great lover of Robert E. Howard and Conan, and they're quite a prominent force. I think actually more probably in Cull, isn't it? Cull of Volusia and all that kind of stuff. But Serpent folk are a kind of staple archetype of RPGs on the weirder end of the spectrum, should we say? So we wanted to give our again, it's a little bit like the previous chapter. We wanted to classify a little bit what an Ophidian society might look like. So at the top, you've got these in the lore of the book. The Ophidians have been asleep for millennia, and they're just waiting for the age of the warm bloods to be over, so that they can rise again. And they've got various subterranean cities mainly in Africa, which have been sunk, and there's millions of serpent people in hibernation within those cities, just waiting for the time to be revived properly. But they still do keep an eye on the surface world, and some are brought out of hibernation to do just that. So we've got everything from the ruling class. We've got sorcerers and engineers, warriors, infiltrators, spies, all the way down to sort of the lower artisan classes. There's even a serf/slave class that the Ophidians use, because they're not above using their own people for labour and even food sometimes, which is one of the funner aspects. But we also, one interesting thing that came up during developing this, and it was a sort of team effort. I think it was some of the guys were booting around this idea of having this great schism in serpent society way back in millennia. So some of the serpents started experimenting with their own children, and the serpent empire was sort of really in decline. And so some of the serpents ended up experimenting on their own children with sorcery and chemistry, and trying to evolve them and get them to, have new characteristics that would help them sort of help revive the race. So we have this this setup where half of the serpents, or the Ophidians, believe that you should be pure blood and you should not mess with your DNA and all that kind of thing. And then the other half are the evolved, who have these enhanced characteristics that have been bred into them. And there's a sort of real clash between these two types, which ends up as a civil war. And eventually their god intervenes and says, enough of this, you need to go into hibernation. the tension between those two classes remain. And this allows you to have some kind of, as well as all the sort of classes of serpent folk, it lets you have some kind of really crazy mutant serpent people as well. So ones with extra tails or hypnotic eyes or waving hair that may or may not have been the source of the Medusa legend. So we have a lot of fun with providing all these different Ophidian NPCs, not just the serpent folk themselves as well, I should say, but also their creatures and beasts, because they like to ride strange things like griffins into battle, and they've got that, obviously, their own snakes and dog-like creatures called amit, giant constrictors, and even the very fearsome serpapard. But I won't reveal too much about that. It's a giant guardian of the snake cities. We should probably let players encounter that for themselves, right?
So chapter 6, tools of the trade. We all love equipment, and even though this is about 11 pages, maybe it's jam-packed full of different stuff. And it looks like this chapter does a great job in letting you know where, what country of origin, what's exactly is a heavy weapon, and some other special stuff here and there. What can you tell us about this chapter?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose this one is actually one that draws most heavily on the Call of Cthulhu, or draws fairly heavily on the Call of Cthulhu edition, because, yeah, you're absolutely right. Who doesn't want some fun and interesting tools of the trade to and weapons and equipment to kind of give their characters? So we wanted to give, in this particular chapter, we wanted to give players some of the iconic toys of the theatre, if you like. So we've got things like the Desert Survival Kit, the weirdly named Bong Stick, a few rules for minesweeping, because mines were quite a big factor in the Desert War, and also some iconic stuff like a Lewis machine gun, or the British 25-pounder artillery, which played a big role in that particular campaign. But also, of course, it being the Secret War, we couldn't. And I should say, of course, there's a whole range of new equipment for Italian forces, which we hope is kind of nice and authentic. So. Yeah, there's plenty of kind of conventional options as well, but this being the Secret War, we of course wanted to give players some new esoteric and weirder options as well. So, we've got a few things like the Schwarzer Flammenwerfer, the Eben flamethrower for the Black Sun, various Blauer crystal devices for the Nachtwolf. But we've also got a bunch of stuff that's unique to the Ophidians as well. So things like fang whips, crossbows, even a microwave mining cannon. I see from my notes here. So and one other thing that probably should mention is that it being a serpent campaign, there's quite a lot of poison and poison effects. So we've got various things to help and hinder players, anti-venom syringes, rules for poisonous and venomous weapons, and even a few unique serpent weapons like the sliver rifle and venom bomb. So yeah, it was just about giving this chapter, as they usually are, just about giving the players really some fun new toys to explore that makes sense within the campaign.
Chapter 7, spells and tomes. What can you tell us about this section? It's a short section, probably the shortest section of the whole book. But what can you tell us about? Is this the introduction, I guess, of Ophidian magic?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Again, it being a guide, we want to give players more fun stuff to explore, and so this is the spell book of Yig. Yig is the Ophidians' god, well established within the sort of Cthulhu lore and stuff, and it being primarily Ophidian magic, though it can be used by their cultists as well, and even human sorcerers if they so kind of learn the forbidden words, etc. So using the sort of natural snake-like characteristics, some of it's based on illusion, some of it's based on or camouflage, some of it's based on venom, some of it's based on things like we've got one called the coils of the constrictor, which sprouts these great big phantom snake coils, which will sort of enfold people, or you can summon snake swarms, or even using one spell called the Serpent Strike. These sort of monstrous fangs dart out and smite your opponents. So yeah, we wanted to do that and give a sort of thematic and appropriate thing, because we figured that the Ophidians would be big magic users as well, and that Yig would grant them his gifts of magic to use to subjugate the puny humans, the hairless apes as they sometimes called. So there's plenty of there's quite a few new battlefield spells for them, a couple of rituals, and there's also a nice section I think on, and I did a little bit of work on this section myself. Some of the in theatre books, manuscripts and tomes that you might expect to find in North Africa. So they range from demons, jinn and other legendary denizens of the desert, which is a Victorian kind of notebook of an explorer from that era, to a Greek account of Alexander's travels, the true story, called In the Macedon's Footsteps, and then even stuff like Whispers of the Desert, which is a pre-Islamic collection of poetry and prose, which hints at stuff like the City of Pillars, Iron, and many other places forgotten or best left undisturbed. So we've tried to give a nice cross selection of books, of manuscripts and tomes that would be, what you might expect to come across in some of the wilder places of North Africa.
And for this section, last but not least, chapter 8, Beagles and Creatures. It sounds very self-explanatory. Anything special you want to mention about this section?
Yeah, I guess just probably we couldn't really do North Africa without doing the long-range desert group patrol vehicle. So there's one of those for agents to use. A very iconic. I don't know if anyone's seen the recent SAS Rogue Heroes, but I watched that and thoroughly enjoyed it. So that was definitely going in the Chevrolet 30 kilowatt truck. There's a couple of Nachtwolf experimental Robowaffe, or kind of more robotic vehicles as well, which we figured North Africa would be the perfect place for Nachtwolf to test their wilder ideas. So there's a couple of walkers in there, and sort of remote control reconnaissance devices. And then just to round off, we've got some of the iconic creatures of the desert. So you couldn't really do a North Africa book without having stats for a camel, right? Because you use them to travel all over the place. But we've got also creatures like the desert hawk and mongoose and various sand snakes that players may or may not find useful in their travels. So yeah, a few of those, just again providing a few options for the GM if they want to use them. I know a lot of players are quite like companions and pets, and it's certainly very handy to have a hawk or a mongoose as one of those, because they can get places that perhaps you wouldn't get yourself.
Now, viewers, That was just part one, and that part one has 8 chapters in it. The second half of this book is all campaign. There are 10 missions altogether. It's vast, it's huge. And I wish I could talk about it, but we can't because this is a non-spoilery video. Perhaps sometime in the future we could do something a little more. We could go more deeper into it. But so, what can you share? I know this is going to be difficult, and I apologize. But so yeah, this is like over 100 pages of adventure material, not including the adventure seeds from the first, for the part one, for the first one, which they're scattered throughout. And this is the main adventure. What can you tell us as best you can about the main adventure?
Sure. Well, I guess, I mean, it's probably not a secret given the title that this is going to be a campaign which features the Serpent people. And yeah, when it came to planning it, I want, as usual, we want, we try and provide peaks and troughs throughout the campaign. So it starts off very sedately in Alexandria, and I think you never want to call it the greatest hits, but I think there's a certain expectation that if you're setting a campaign in North Africa, you would visit some of the really iconic things about the region. So, it's set in and around the actual timeline, although of course this can be adapted to other people's campaigns. It's set around the siege of Tobruk, the first siege of Tobruk, where the Australians held out so gallantly. So it's no surprise to find that you'll probably be, and if you're on the Allied side, of course, Alexandria, Cairo, and Tobruk are 3 places that you would probably expect to visit. Throughout the course of the campaign, though, you'll be going deep into the desert. And one thing I can talk about, actually, without being too spoilery, is there's a whole chapter devoted to desert traversal. So this actually plays a part in the campaign, but it's almost like a whole generate your own adventure yourself, because we give you rules to play out your supplies, your water, not meticulous, and there's not loads of bookkeeping to do, but it allows you to just randomly generate a journey through all manner of desert, and with encounters, hazards, some interesting places, some deadly places, and I think that's quite an interesting thing to give, again, as a tool for a GM. It can be, I mean, these are deserts in North Africa, but they can be readily adapted to deserts throughout the world. But anyway, moving back to the main campaign. So I will say it starts slow and eventually builds up to what you'd hope would be an epic climax, as you have to prevent the rise of a new Serpent Empire. And it will be quite a twisting and interesting, I hope, journey to get there. I think it will be quite a hefty investment in time, but we hope it will provide a lot of fun and a lot of thrills for the sort of pulp action that Achtung Cthulhu players expect and demand. So I won't give too much away, but I would say that be prepared for a thriller-minute ride.
I'll be honest, I have a trouble distinguishing which I like better between Atlantis and this book. They're both, the stories are fantastic.
Oh, that's great.
So before we before we wrap up, so this book is now available.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, you get it a digital version and a physical version through your local gaming stores.
Yeah. I think it may be taking a little time to get over to the US, just the way logistics sadly are at the moment. But you can order it and get the PDF straight away, and we hope the books will be following shipping over to the States post-States. It's out in Europe at the moment.
Okay, all right, excellent. So before we wrap up, So we were talking before we started our interview about a new book coming out shortly. Well, not too shortly. What can you tell us about it?
Well, yes, as we were saying, I was just saying it's time always presses on, and there's no rest for the wicked, as it were. So yeah, our next release will be, it's not too far away actually, in June this year. It's Vive la Resistance, which is a new softback this time, quite a little bit shorter than the epic campaign that you'll find in Serpent and the Sands. And it's basically a sort of source book for all those who want to pursue a career in the resistance in Europe. We had to sort of focus it down a little. There are an amazing amount of resistance movements throughout the world, but so we concentrated on the main big five in Europe, which were France, Holland, Yugoslavia, and a couple of the others, Poland, of course, and some of the Jewish resistance and the German and Italian resistance. So we focused it mainly around Europe. Again, it's going to give you a bunch of options if you want to pick a resistance themed character, everything from a cell leader to a saboteur, an assassin, some of the new archetypes. There'll be new backgrounds and characteristics, more tools of the trade, resistance themed ones, and some interesting enemies to test your mettle as a resistance leader or resistance fighter. And we conclude it all with 5 kind of shorter priority missions, which will allow sort of GMs to the beginnings of some interesting resistance themed campaigns.
All right, excellent.
I'm sure we'll be able to send a copy your way as soon as it's released, so you can check it out.
Indeed, I would definitely be interested in reviewing it. So yes, any last words?
No, just a big thank you to all the fans who've bought the book so far. I hope you're really enjoying it, and don't be afraid to drop in on our official Discord, or there's a great Achtung Cthulhu fan group on Facebook, which we try and keep an eye on, and I'm usually around to answer questions and requests and all that kind of thing. So don't be afraid to come say hello.
And viewers, thank you for watching, and you should really definitely check out Achtung Cthulhu. It's a very fascinating collection of books. So yes, everyone, take care, be safe out there. We'll see you soon.